Best of r/Tales from Retail episode 27. Many years ago I worked for a large mobile phone company and a customer came in with a phone she had purchased. She put it on the counter and asked if I could fix the earpiece as it was far too quiet even on its loudest setting. I looked at the phone, called a free test number and the volume seemed fine. I gave the lady back the phone and asked her to stand at the end of the store and I'd call her to check it out. I rang her and she signaled that she couldn't hear. I tried again and the volume was fine, so I sent her to the end of the store and rang her again. Same issue. I then shouted to her to try the other ear, and yes, it worked fine. She came back to the counter and asked me what I did different. I looked at her with surprise and said, "I think you're deaf in that ear." She walked off looking very embarrassed. Thank you. Next. I work at a college bookstore. Last week was pretty busy because of the influx of students coming in to get their testing forms for their finals. Now that the quarter is over, the store and school has been pretty dead. We're mostly catering to people turning in their rentals and those few who want to grab a bite to eat or get supplies for next quarter. I wasn't doing much of anything by the register when a young guy came in and hurried to the supply section. I thought he was just getting some basic stuff, but he went over to the test forms and grabbed a sheet. As he ran up to me, I started asking him a few questions. Are you doing a makeup final? That's the only reason it might be possible for him to have his test late. Otherwise a teacher cannot schedule a final outside of that week. No? He laughed. Oh. Then are you preparing for next quarter? No, my final is today. Oof. Grimacing face. So all finals were last week. Wait. Are you saying I missed my... I give an affirming nod, and I just see his heart sink to the floor. I'd suggest emailing your teacher ASAP. I never thought it would happen, but it did. Thank you. Next. Edit. Added extra spacing and fixed some grammar/spelling mistakes. Second edit. Didn't expect this much attention. Thanks all for the stories you all have gone through similar to this. And for those of you stating it's not technically winter, I don't really care. It's snowing with ice outside. I'll call it winter if I want to. Thank you. Next. This instance I was working at big American electronics store, and was the only time I've ever fallen for this crap in my 5 years of retail. It's a slow day, and we had a call out in the gaming department, so I was doing rounds between there and my usual department. A gentleman flags me down and asks me to pull an Xbox One out of the case for him. Cool, no big deal. He holds his hand out so he can take it up to the front. And obviously according to store policy that's not going to happen. But customers don't always think, so I don't think much of it and walk him over to a nearby register. We're chatting as we walk up, and when we get to the register I set the Xbox down on the counter so I can log into the POS. That's when I hear, "Shoplifter, sorry bruh, this ain't your day." I look up as he grabs the Xbox and starts sprinting. At this point my mind is reeling because I'll let that happen by setting expensive products down on the counter right in front of this ass. So, of course I do the stupidest thing possible. I chase him. I quickly explain the situation over the walkie-talkie and tell her to call the cops, and I follow the guy, who's a good 100 feet ahead of me, round the corner, behind the store, and I watch as he starts booking it down a bike trail behind the store. At that point, I stop, defeated. Because no way am I going chasing him down the sketchy bike trail. But then a cop on a motorcycle whizzes up next to me and I quickly point him in the right direction. I walk back into my store praying that this man gets his comeuppance. 5 minutes later, I'm greeted with the sight of the cop walking back in with the Xbox, and the shoplifter cuffed in the back of a cop car. I casually walk outside, and ask the cop what happened. Me, sweet. You got him. How'd that go? Cop, well, cop 1 caught up to him on the motorcycle and tackled him. He went down hard, but got up and started sprinting again. Me, so, how'd you get him? Cop, I showed up on the other side of the bike trail and tackled him. He went down hard again and ditched the Xbox and ran the other way. Me, ha 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 ha. Cop, and then cop 1 tackled him a 3rd time and he just kind of gave up. And now he's here. At this point I walked up to the side of the car and locked eyes with the would-be shoplifter. Me, ha 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 ha, guess today isn't your day, is it? I high-fived the cops involved. Thank you. Next. So back at major American electronics retailer, my store was on one of the sketchier streets in major West Coast city, and as a result we had quite a few shoplifters. So I have a million of these stories. On this particular instance, a gentleman came in with standard "I found these clothes on the street. I am clearly here to steal something" attire, and as a result all eyes were on him. He beelined to my department, mobile phones, and immediately ducked down into the prepaid phone section. I was with a customer at the time, so I was not personally checking in on him. One of the new hires checked in on him twice to very rude responses, and thus left him alone. In the 2 minutes nobody was standing directly over him, he takes out a knife and cuts one of the phones off of the peg in full view of 2 managers and 3 associates who walk in front of him and tell him to give back the phone. He obviously does not comply and begins dribbling the phone around his body and behind his back so the managers can't grab it out of his hands. At this time I had just finished with my customer. I casually walked up behind him as he tries his best to tap into his inner NBA player, and gently pull the phone out of his hands as he held it behind his back. The look of shock and annoyance on his face fueled me for days. Shoplifter, hey, you can't do that. Me, well, apparently I can. Me, wanna know what else I can do? Shoplifter? Me, tell you to get the hell out of my store. He left dejected and disappointed. Thank you. Next. A customer walked into the store on his phone. We don't usually greet customers when they are talking on the phone because we don't want to interrupt. While this guy wanders around the store, a couple of my regulars come up to check out. I finish checking them out and I start bagging their items, and phone guy, still on the phone, steps in front of them and barks at me. So are you going to help me? I hand my regulars their bags, apologize, and tell them to have a nice night. Me, how can I help you tonight? Phone guy, yeah, what do you want? I'm talking to someone right now. Yeah, my wife is looking for Golden Blow Premium. This describes about 10 things in my store. Me, is she looking? Phone guy, yeah, what was that? Yeah, she doesn't know. It describes specific product. Me, oh, okay, yes, I can. Phone guy, here, this is easier. This guy straight up hands me his greasy phone, which from previous retail jobs has always been a huge number, but I decided why not just go with it. So I talked to his wife, who was equally snippy and rude, for about 10 minutes and had to explain to her that my store doesn't carry the specific brand she was looking for. She tried to argue with me that our website said we had it in stock. We don't have a specific store website, just a corporate one, and I wasn't looking hard enough. I asked her if there was anything else I could help her with, to which her response was, "You haven't helped me at all." I handed the phone back to the guy and his response was, "Thanks for nothing. Can't believe I drove all the way down here just to be treated like this." TLDR. Rude guy on a phone hands me his phone to talk to his rude wife. They are both upset when we don't have a line of product in stock. Thank you. Next. Oh, how I love Christmas in retail. Before I begin, I'd like to say that in this little meeting we had with this dude, not one of us threw around swear words or names. We were respectful and therefore he had no right in acting the way he did. So as myself and my co-workers were leaving through our after hours door tonight after the store closes, one of my managers notices a little girl climbing up on some old shelving in our back dock next to where we keep our dumpster bin, followed by an older guy who pretty much dived right into it. Our manager yells out for the little girl to get off as the shelving wasn't stable enough for a person and we were worried about the lid of the dumpster falling and breaking some bones. That was when we noticed the old guy and then proceeded to yell at him to get out. The bin was on our private property and that dumpster contained broken wood, glass and plastic, aka rubbish. I guess he didn't like that. There was about 7 of us outside, 2 managers included. So one of my managers walked towards the guy along with my brother who backed her up in case anything was to happen. She explained to him that he couldn't go through our bins and that it was dangerous in general to have his granddaughter climb up to get in and they both could have gotten hurt. What I mean, I can't do this. I'm just trying to make a living here. I'm not doing anything wrong. This guy began to call out slurs and to call all of us scum, demon spawn etc as we were telling him to stop his dumpster diving. He was throwing around swear words, which by the way the entire time his granddaughter who was about 7 was standing to the side watching as her grandfather was getting up into our faces. It was about 10 minutes worth of back and forth between the manager and this guy. All I'm doing is trying to look for bottles. This is my living and you selfish slurs are stopping me. This isn't your property. It's the council's property, so you can't say anything. You're just feeding your ego. We had to explain that the bin was in our back dock and therefore was on private property and was ours until the minute it was collected by the council trucks. Then we threatened to call security, to which he invited us to do so. Eventually, my manager was trying to stop the whole thing, telling him to look at his granddaughter who was cowering to the side, saying, "Look at her, she's scared. You need to leave and take her home. She doesn't need to hear this," and he literally scoffs sarcastically and says, "Great, she's scared of bins now." Dead set. I have no idea where it came from or how we have somehow terrified this young girl into being scared of bins just by telling her grandfather to stop going through pieces of wood and broken glass as he looked for bottles. The manager and my brother walked away from him, and the next few minutes we stood at the back door hearing him call us names, repeating that he was doing nothing wrong and that he was just trying to get by. At one point he actually walked over to all of us, holding up a bag and saying, "Look, this is 20 cents mate." We let him be, although noticed he was still hanging around with the little girl, so we knew as soon as we left and shut the door he would be back in there, so we did have to call security. Although about the same time as they arrived, a woman drove up in her car and I'm assuming it was the guy's wife. He spent about 5 minutes complaining to the security guards, who I guess just told him to leave, and he eventually drove off. And obviously in the Christmas spirit, as he gave us the finger when driving by, while calling us dogs, I shouted out for him to have a Merry Christmas. Well, I'm happy that after a 9-hour day I got 20 minutes worth of amusement. I also hope that his granddaughter has a caring home to go to instead of having to deal with that man.